How you like how we're starting this show already? Pretty good, huh? You're so glad that you tuned in. Telling you, it's a wonderful Friday. Maybe it's Christian Clark. A couple of weeks ago, with internet services left over from 1999, Christian Clark was on this show. And we were talking about the Pelicans' hot streak, and if they could just squeeze out a few more home games and then have a great homestand, maybe they could finish ahead of the Clippers in fourth place. Well, here we are, and my internet's working. I can't do a graphic to save my life, but the internet's working. And the Pelicans, well, they're a whole nother seventh place story. And so you guessed it. Guess what? It's another happy, joy episode of the Dattitude podcast. And it's coming up next.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to all my friends elsewhere, everywhere out there who have bought every piece of cardboard in the city ready for the solar eclipse that's coming on Monday. I'm sorry if I'm not more excited about my where you at, New Orleans. I'm a little under the weather. I think the solar eclipse has hit me in reverse. Whatever it is, more on that to come in just a second. I know you can't wait. First, the legalities or whatever you want to call them. This is Dattitude, episode number 223 for a Friday, April the 5th. I am your host, Jim Derry. Let me turn this down just a little. There we go. Whether you're watching on one of our social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being part of the Dattitude family. Look, there's a few things before we get to the Pelicans, and Christian Clark is coming up in a little bit to talk about the Pels and the slide and how important tonight's game is against the Spurs, how important their last 6 games are. You know, we're starting to get into must-win territory because they have now fallen into the play-in game. That's where they are right now. They're in the play-in game if the season ended today. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about this social eclipse. Is it eclipse or is it eclipse? Eclipse. I'm going to go with eclipse today. I always like to make fun of, if you've listened to the show for any extended amount of time, you know that I live in St. Antonio Parish. You know that I like to poke fun at our school system here because they continue, every time there's like whatever, they continue to utter the phrase out of an abundance of caution. They take off of school, have half days, whatever. They will take off the school when the wind blows harder than my dog farts. Okay, I'm not exaggerating. If it looks like, oh my God, it might rain on Monday, half a day, cancel school. That's how it is here. So, but Jefferson Parish on Monday said, hold my beer, pal. Out of an abundance of sheer idiocy, these geniuses are having a half day on Monday for the solar eclipse. And yes, they used the phrase out of an abundance of caution. I'm really starting to wonder if someone out there is making money every time some numbskull says it. Anyway, in an email that was sent to parents yesterday, that, quote, while this event promises to be an incredible learning experience, we want to take every precaution to protect the safety of our students. From what? Do giant beams shoot out of a partial solar eclipse through the windows of every school in Jefferson Parish? Or can you not trust your teachers to keep the kids inside during the eclipse so you don't get sued when they stare right into the sun? Oh, that's it. We don't want them to stare at the sun and some kid goes blind and they're going to sue the parish. Oh, wait, some administrator must have stopped watching the news when Margaret Orr retired last week. There's a 60% chance of rain and a 100% chance of clouds in New Orleans on Monday. So unless kids can find a way to make their Star Wars action figures fly 30,000 feet in the air, they ain't seeing no solar eclipse. I mean, come on. We have to cancel school now for this? I don't get it. I really don't get it. By the way, there is breaking news outside of the sports world that I think is worthy of mentioning here in Dattitude that is worthy of not going to school. 4.8 on the Richter scale, an earthquake, unconfirmed reports outside of somewhere in New Jersey. So I don't know if that's offshore. It says Gabe's telling me near New Jersey. So I don't know if that means it could have been in the ocean or what near New Jersey means. But I know they were talking about feeling the effects. He was telling me in Philadelphia and New York City. So something we may want to pay attention to. Let's get back to the Sun, because speaking of the Suns, how about the Phoenix Suns? They are now in 6th place, and they have caught the Pelicans and knocked the Pelicans into 7th place. 7th place. Let's talk about it with Christian Clark. Christian, I promise you my internet is working a lot better than it was working the last time we talked.
Hey, all good, man. These things happen in our technological world in 2024. I get it.
You know, unfortunately, we are married to these things, and if they don't work, we don't work. So, but like I said, you know, at least all I'll tell you is don't stare into the sun on Monday. No matter what happens, just don't stare into the sun. All right, speaking of Suns, again, the Phoenix Suns have now caught the Pels. We see the standings here on the screen. They are tied in the standings, but the Phoenix Suns own the tiebreaker. The Pelicans still have to play the Suns next week. They will play the Phoenix Suns, and what could be a huge game. Another huge game on the horizon. Don't want to talk about it just yet, but that last game against the Lakers that we were hoping that might not matter, that's looking like it could be very important as well. The Lakers are starting to play well. Man, you wrote about the Zion being injured and now day-to-day. What is going on with this basketball team?
Yeah, it looks like they've lost a little bit of confidence, honestly. I mean, this was always going to be a very difficult homestand. I mean, you're playing some of the NBA's best. You would have liked to have been at full strength. Obviously, Brandon Ingram has been out for the past 7 games. Zion Williamson sat out the last 7 minutes of that game against Orlando with finger injury. He's fine. He had an X-rayed. He's listed as questionable tonight. My experience with Zion is that he's actually a guy who tries to play through discomfort despite all the weirdness. So if I had to guess right now, I would guess that he plays, but this is a really tough stretch. They don't have Brandon Ingram and they're not playing very well, especially on the offensive end.
Yeah. And they're not even in a position, you would hope playing against a team that's in last place in the NBA West, you would hope, let's just sit Zion. We don't need to play him. But they can't afford to take a chance. They have to win this game to finish up. You cannot close a homestand 1-5 when you're trying to get in the playoffs.
I mean, 100%. I felt like coming into this homestand, I was like, all right, I think they need to go 3-3 to give themselves a really good chance of staying out of the play-in tournament. They have to have this one tonight. I think the playoffs basically started a week ago. All these games have felt very intense. The NBA season is so long. There's so many games. It feels like a lot of these games in December, January, they're just kind of rolling the balls out there. And the coaches aren't coaching the games and they're not making the best adjustments or anything. They're making all the best adjustments right now. You can just tell how important all these games are. They're packing the paint on Zion. That's one way you can tell. That's how the Pelicans are going to get guarded in the playoffs if they make it there. The other team's center is just going to ignore Jonas Valanciunas, Larry Nance Jr., and they're going to park themselves in the lane. And that's what we've seen these last few games against the Pelicans.
We're here with Christian Clark this Friday morning on the Dattitude Podcast, episode number 223. If you are watching live, you can join us. You can type in your comment or question for Christian, or you can talk to me if you want. YouTube, Facebook, X/Twitter. Just type it in and we will show it here on the screen. Also, I forgot to tell you earlier, we're asking you to politely subscribe to the Dattitude YouTube page. Christian, look, again, you take a look at these standings, and last time you were on, we were talking about whether the Pels could catch the Clippers. I mean, because the Clippers had kind of had a little rough patch as well. They made it through. They remained 5 games back, but that's a pipe dream now. I think the best you can hope for, I don't even think you can really hope for catching Dallas at this point, even though you're only a game back. So really your goal right now is to finish 6th and hope that Denver doesn't finish 3rd.
I mean, that's exactly right. You got to try to finish 6th. I don't think they're going to be able to catch Dallas. The Clippers, there's a one time in the year I thought Clippers were a contender, and I don't view them that way anymore. I mean, I'm looking at the Clippers. If it's a 4-5 with Dallas, I like Dallas coming out of that series. But the Pelicans, the team they have to catch is the Phoenix Suns. Massive, massive game Sunday in the desert. New Orleans and Phoenix. Pelicans haven't beaten the Suns this year. Devin Booker has scored more than 50 in 3 straight games against the Pelicans. First guy since Wilt Chamberlain to score 50 or more 3 straight times against another team. I mean, that's insanity.
How does that happen?
Look, I'm like a huge Herb Jones fan, like driving the bandwagon. Exactly. It has not gone well for these last few games against Devin Booker. I mean, like the Pelicans have great perimeter defenders, Herb Jones and Dyson Daniels, and Devin Booker has just like filleted them. It's been incredible.
And the way the game started, Christian, Monday, I thought it was going to be Kevin Durant that was going to do the damage because he started off hot. And all of a sudden, Devin Booker just three. I mean, at some point, it's kind of like LSU. You know, it's kind of apropos that they were on side by side on the TV screens because Devin Booker just came down shooting threes, raining threes down, and Pelicans just decided, okay, we're just going to let him shoot threes. I mean, do you realize who this dude is? I mean, he's killed you over and over again, and they just couldn't figure out how to play defense against the dude.
Yeah, I agree. And like one of the notes I had from like rewatching that game, I mean, this guy's killed you 2 games in a row. How is it so easy for him? Like, how is this possible? Like, you know, like when he made a few shots early in the game, it's like, I don't know why Herb Jones, and this is like maybe a coaching thing or something, but like, why is he not just denying Devin Booker the ball? Like, why is he even allowing him to catch it so easily? Like, screw the other 4 guys on the court. Like, I mean, this one guy has killed you 3 straight games. Like, you know, like take him away and see if anyone else can beat you. They might, but at least try.
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. All right, you look at the remaining schedule, and we talked about this homestand before. I mean, even when we talked 2 weeks ago, and it was still, you know, I think 4 or 5 days before they still had 2 games left, I think, before the homestand. But we were talking about how important this homestand was even back then. Okay, so it's not going to happen. Let's assume the Pels win tonight. I know you can't assume anything with this team, but let's assume they get it together and they beat San Antonio. I mean, what do we realistically think going down the stretch? And those are all, to me, iffy games. Even Portland, who really has nothing to play for, at Phoenix, at Portland, at Sacramento, at Golden State. I mean, Sacramento, the good news is, and I did leave this out, the Pelicans did at least clinch a play-in spot last night when the Rockets lost. So that's the good news, that we know they'll be playing at least April 16th and beyond somewhere. But what is realistically, assuming they win tonight, what do you think their record has to be in those final 5 games to avoid the play-in game?
Probably 4-1. I mean, maybe 3-2 gets it done. I mean, like, look, Sunday, both of those teams are going to be going really hard. That's going to be a difficult game to win. After that, like the Sacramento game will as well, I would imagine. But like the Golden State game, this, like when you get down to like the second to last game, it's possible the Golden State's just locked into 10 and they decide to sit guys.
Right.
So that's where it gets a little bit weird this time of year, where it's like you look at the beginning of the season, you're like, oh, this isn't an easy one. But then, you know, at second last game of the season, the team is locked in to like Golden State, for instance, 10th. Are they going to sit Steph Curry? I mean, you don't know at this point. So I think projecting it is difficult, but I mean, tonight is a must win. They have to win this game against the Spurs, who are, I mean, like they're really bad, but Wembanyama is so good right now. Like it's not a cakewalk, I don't think.
No. And look, I think we've said it. I don't think there's any team in the league right now. And then one thing I will give the Pelicans, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that they have been able to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. That's the good news. I mean, they really have. Throughout the entire season, they pretty much won the games they're supposed to win. The problem is they haven't been always, I mean, they're losing tiebreakers to they're in a tie with anyone in the West. They're going to lose the tiebreaker because they haven't been good against the teams at the top, except for the Clippers. They haven't really been good against anyone. And so I just think that these games, you talk about tonight being a must win, absolutely. But I'm going to go as far to say, if you're talking about avoiding play-in game, Sunday I think is a must win.
Yeah, because I mean, look, they're tied in the standings right now. You know, if they win and the Suns win today, the Suns, you know, go like one full game ahead. I mean, I agree completely. They've got to find a way to win Sunday. The one thing I will say on tiebreakers, they don't own it versus Phoenix. It is to their benefit that they own it against Sacramento. They've beaten Sacramento in all 4 games they've played against them this year.
You hope you don't end up in an 8th place tie.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers are pretty close too. I mean, they're
getting closer. That's what I'm saying.
They're lurking for sure. I mean, I would I'm hopeful that the Lakers are locked into their spot in game 82, because if they're not, then that could be a war at Smoothie King Center.
I don't have it on the screen, but I think the Lakers are now only 9.5 back. So they are literally just behind Sacramento and a game and a half behind the Pelicans. So, yeah, I mean, if the Pelicans lose one of these games, the way the Lakers are playing right now, they may not lose. So that game very well could come down for the 8th spot. That could come down for the 7th spot. That could come, depends on what the Lakers do the rest of the way and the Pelicans. But I do like their schedule. I do think they're going to show up, and I don't mean just show up and play. I think they're going to win tonight. I think they're going to find a way to win Sunday. I don't know why I'm saying that, because logic says they're not. But when you look at betting trends, and remember when BI got hurt and they played the Heat the next night, and everyone was out there saying, "Oh, go put your mortgage on the Heat." Well, I mean, the Pelicans came out and played well and played like they had a chip on their shoulder. And I think if they can play like they have a chip on their shoulder these next 3 games and get ahead of the curve, I think they have a chance to win all 3 of them.
Look, Sunday, obviously priority number 1 is figure out a way to stop Devin Booker. You cannot allow him to torch you again. But the other thing I look at is with no Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram is the guy they throw out there to guard Kevin Durant, and I actually think Brandon Ingram has had quietly a nice defensive season. Without him, it either falls on Trey Murphy or Zion Williamson. That's a pretty big ask for either of those guys defensively. Just can you guard one of the greatest scorers of all time? So that makes me a little bit nervous, but I still think they can do it. Like they're capable of doing it. It's just not going to be easy.
You look at this record, and it's really kind of disheartening. They got to 17 games above 500, and now we see them at 45-31. I mean, there was a time when I'm thinking this team's going to win 50 games, and theoretically they still could win 50 games. You got to go 5-1 down the stretch to win 50 games. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not likely. But what has happened? What do you think that, obviously BI, the injury has hurt them, I think, more than a lot of us expected. But other than that, what do you see? What has happened these past 5 games that you think has changed this team and changed kind of the direction that they were going?
I think a big thing is the defenses have adjusted to a little bit with Zion with the ball in his hands, and they are playing the way you're going to see them play in the postseason. That is having their center ignore Jonas Valanciunas, Larry Nance Jr., park themselves in the lane. I think that has made things difficult for the Pelicans, for Zion specifically. And then just not putting 48 minutes together. Like that third quarter just killed the Pelicans in Orlando. And, I guess personnel and not having Brandon Ingram was definitely a part of that. But I just don't think they played well. And the other thing I would say too is, when Brandon Ingram is healthy, that allows you to bring Trey Murphy off the bench. I think Trey Murphy is one of the better subs in the NBA. When Trey Murphy has to move in the starting lineup, the bench just doesn't have a whole lot of offensive pop. Suddenly you're kind of left with these guys who are really just defensive oriented players. Jose Alvarado, he's been out, but Jordan Hawkins hasn't been given them much. Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr. Majority of those guys are defensively oriented guys. Your kind of scorer off the bench has now had to move into the starting lineup. I think it's really weakened them there.
There are 2 things that I want to touch on. And number 1 is Zion. And you talk about how he's kind of been different. Yeah, they've been doubling up on him, but really they've kind of been doubling up on him over the past couple months. He was okay. It didn't bother him for 5 or 6 weeks. And now all of a sudden he seems to be playing a little bit differently. Again, I don't know if it's because Brandon Ingram's not in, and maybe he misses Brandon Ingram more than a lot of us thought, or something's a little bit different. Something's not quite right, and it has nothing to do with the finger. Obviously, that didn't happen until the third quarter on Wednesday night anyway. What does Zion got to do down the stretch, and not just these games, but when they get into the postseason? I mean, to me, everything kind of centers around him, obviously. And if he can't get something going, if he can't be the dominant player that he had been for the majority of probably 2 months, 3 months, then I don't think this team has much of a chance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, honestly, it's just against good defenses when they're engaged, it's just going to look a little bit awkward for the Pelicans at times, because Zion is an incredible talent, but he also has one move. He wants to get to his left hand and shoot at the rim. He's not a guy who is even willing to take jumpers at this point. You look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of his comps. Giannis Antetokounmpo will take some jumpers and, got even like a little more in his bag at the rim. Paolo Banchero, I think another guy kind of similar to Zion. He wants to drive the ball. Paolo Banchero will take and make jumpers. I mean, I think you have your best player who's kind of, got to add more to his game. And also he's not playing next to a 5 who spaces the floor. I think that's been probably one of the Pelicans' biggest failings is, they knew what they had in Zion. They knew this guy wasn't a jump shooter, and we're 5 years in, and they've never really put a stretch 5 next to him. I mean, I think Jonas Valanciunas has done a nice job of trying to take threes, but that's not who he is at his core. He wants to score at the rim. And so, if you're going to have your best player who doesn't take jumpers, you got to try to make sure everyone else on the floor can shoot, and they don't have that. So I think there's just times when it's going to look awkward.
I'm super impressed, by the way, that twice you pronounce Giannis's last name correctly, it was on the tip of your tongue and just rolled off like that. I'm a play-by-play guy, and I pride myself on pronouncing names right. I'm not even trying that one. So, and you did it twice, so pretty darn impressive, Christian.
He's only won 2 MVPs.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it's what is it, 28 letters or something like that? The other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the Pels is I have seen a different team emotionally the last couple of weeks as well. The refs stunk Wednesday night. There's no other way to put it. They were terrible. And that ref, whoever that ref is that had a chip on his shoulder at the end of the game, shouldn't even be officiating basketball, in my opinion. However, that being said, you don't allow yourself to get into those positions. You don't allow yourself to be sucked in over and over again, and they kind of were Wednesday night. And to me, good teams don't get you don't see Denver doing those kinds of things, in my opinion. You don't really see Oklahoma City doing those sorts of things. Minnesota maybe a little bit, but I just think if you're going to be a championship caliber team, you can't let a bad set of refs ruin your night. And this isn't the first time this has happened to this team, in my opinion. So do you see this part of the body language and letting things get down? And, you got a young coach. It's going to happen. But I think this team needs to just pick itself up and say, you know what, screw everybody else. We're just going to do this thing on our own.
That's a really interesting question because on one hand, I do think it's true that Zion does get a pretty tough whistle. And I agreed with Willie Green that Gary Harris, regardless of intent, probably should have been a flagrant foul. But on the other hand,
100%.
They do. Yeah. I mean, I think there is they did definitely that game against the Magic, let their emotions get the best of them. And because of the reffing, I think, that game was in danger of, becoming really, really ugly. You could just tell it was right there of a fight breaking out or something like that. And I think, it's true that Zion gets a tough whistle, but that doesn't mean you can lose your composure. Look, it's just going to be tough. And the other thing I'll say too is, Willie Green really has never, it's not really his coaching style to lose it on the refs, but I do wonder if just one well-timed outburst from him would help. He hasn't gone there yet.
You say that. Chris Reed is typing in, and I agree wholeheartedly. Willie needs to punt the basketball. He needs to see the team getting frustrated and take the ref's attention on him and let the players see that he has their back. Get kicked out of a game. It's okay to do that. But jump out there on the court, and that's what I was waiting for. I'm not saying, look, I don't advocate doing that on a regular basis but once a year to me, you need a good kick and getting kicked out kind of moment. And I think Willie missed his opportunity. You know what? You're all getting kicked out. I'm going to join you.
Yeah, and I would say that the Gary Harris one, when that was not ruled a flagrant, was a great opportunity right there. I mean, if that was me, I would have been like, hey, I am using this to absolutely lose it and see if I could change the momentum of this game a little bit. That was your opportunity, because Willie made a good point the day after. He's intent doesn't matter. A guy can not mean to smack a guy in the head, but it's still ruled a flagrant all the time. If you look up the definition of a flagrant, intent is nowhere in there. So I would have used that to just lose my mind if I was him, and run on him to the court and get 2 inches from the official's face.
And you know what, Christian? That's not just a game-changing kind of moment if you do that. That's a season-changing kind of moment. If you say, that's the rally. Remember how they were rallying behind him in his first season, and that little that first playoff, that only playoff series. They get through the play-in games. They play the Suns, and he's playing the almighty Suns, and this team is hanging with the almighty Suns. And we saw his fired up moments, courtside during timeouts. That was the Willie Green that I want to see, and I don't think I've seen enough of that.
Yeah, it's on one hand, it's like it's not him, but on the other hand, I think he's got that in him. So just do it, like
right.
Especially people in Louisiana, man. They love that passion. Yeah, they love that passion.
Look, you're right. It's not him, and I know it's hard for guys who that's not who they are. But like you say, I mean, sometimes you just got to do it. I mean, just get out there and do it. You'll probably have fun. Who knows? Maybe he'll do it more often. I don't know.
It has been an incredible whiplash going from Van Gundy to Willie Green, where after every loss, Van Gundy was just like, "Hey, these guys are bums. Like they're making terrible decisions," and Willie Green is just like, "Hey, look, we're moving in." I mean, it's just a very different style.
I think Van Gundy thought he was still on TV when he was doing that, when he was coaching. Look. I'll say this. I don't think the Pelicans, I love Monty Williams. I thought they made a huge mistake letting Monty go. I still think that. But I think Willie Green is the kind of young coach that could be here for a long, long time. He's still learning too, and people forget that. So I think these are sorts of things that he can grow into, and I think maybe think about later on, and maybe next time or some other time he will do that. And sometimes you have to do things that are out of character. I mean, it's easy to forget. Dude.
I mean, early 40s.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was an assistant at Golden State for 3 years. I mean, look, there's a reason why Willie Green and Pelicans management wanted James Borrego on the staff. It was, we want somebody with head coaching experience. They both felt like this could be beneficial for us. So that's the reason, a big reason why James Borrego's here.
I know early 40s ain't young for you, my friend, but I'd like to go back to my early 40s. I'm just saying. One day you will too. Christian Clark, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm glad you got the Smoothie King Center behind you in the background, and everything kind of went smooth today, at least for this part. It was rough before you got on, but smooth while you were on.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm reporting live. I don't know if you could tell. It's
yeah, you got practice coming up. I know. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Sometime either right before the playoffs or right after they get started.
All right, Jim. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, bud. Christian Clark here again. He's about to go to practice. That's why we did the show a half an hour earlier today. One thing I did want to talk about before I get to the extra point. You look on the screen there, and all of a sudden those numbers. This is not an old graphic. This is an updated graphic. You see those numbers there. NBA championship. Remember the other day when we were on Wednesday? 2 days ago. They were plus 6,500 at DraftKings to win the championship. Conference championship, they were 2,500, and they've been 2,500 for, I don't know, a few weeks now. Remember how they didn't move at all for weeks? And then they moved to plus 7,000 and plus 2,500, and then they moved to plus 6,500 on Wednesday and plus 2,500. Yeah, well. You lose 4 out of 5 at home, that'll change it in a hurry. And there you see Vegas doesn't think they're going to win it anymore. So you can go back and get that bargain. Look, I'm not going to back off. I said that I thought they were a value play. And what do we talk about when we talk about betting on the show? We don't talk about betting all the time on the show, but we do from here. We will probably more as we get closer to football as well. But we're always looking for values. And to me, that is a value still. Because this team, when Brandon Ingram comes back, and it's going to be sooner rather than later, this team can get hot. I mean, you just heard from Christian. Doesn't look like Zion's injury is all that serious. So, my front page of this, now it's Zion. What I meant is his injury. Maybe not as bad as we thought. So that's good news. And look, I think this Pelicans team really can make a run. Do I think they're going to make a run? No. But again, in the betting world, what you're looking for is values. There's no value on betting on Denver. I mean, they're ridiculous. They're like less than 3-1. Unless you are sitting there certain Denver's going to win a championship again, good for you. You know something I don't know. Unless you're sitting there certain the Boston Celtics are going to win the championship again, you know something I don't know. We were certain Boston was going to be great last year. They're going to win the championship last year. Didn't happen. So I'm looking for value. And if you play this season out, Some of you are out there saying, this dude nuts. Why am I watching this dude? If you play this season out 75 times, I think the Pelicans going to win a championship. I really do. They might win 2. So I still think you're getting value there, and you're buying low. And that's what you're always trying to do when you're talking about betting. You're trying to buy low, and you can't buy the Pelicans any lower than they are right now. They're not going to go any lower than they are right now. So they've clinched a play-in spot. Can they get back to 6? We're going to find out. Again, I think these next 3 games, or at least the next 2, are certainly must-wins. You've got to be able to beat the Spurs to close out this dismal homestand, because even if you win, 2-4 is dismal, in my opinion. I don't care who you played. I don't care if you play the best teams in NBA history. To go 2-4 in a homestand when you have championship aspirations is dismal. And so they've got to finish this out with a win, because it's, I don't know what the word beyond dismal is, horrendous. That's what it is if they don't win tonight. And they're pretty much locked into play-in territory if they lose tonight. And then you got to start worrying about the Lakers catching you, and you got to start worrying about finishing 9 instead of finishing 7. And if you finish 9, then you got to win 2 playoff games, not just 1, play-in games. All right? So there's a big difference between 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. We know this already. The Pelicans have been in play-in territory before. Big time's coming up. If you're a basketball fan, this would be the equivalent of the Saints being, I don't know, 8 and 9 and going into their last game against. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. That happened. Oh, okay. All right, time to move on to the extra point as we wrap up. See, I told you I could finish the show in 45 minutes. It's not over yet, but I know that we can do it now, I think. Extra point, going back in time 31 years ago today. Got to give a shout out to my boy, Mike Prange. He's out there somewhere listening, I know. We were together. I was the sports editor of the UNO Driftwood on April the 5th, 1993. And as a member of that Driftwood staff, we got 2 press passes to cover the Final Four and the national championship game. And my quote-unquote photographer, he really did take pictures for me, but, you got to take your best friend to the national championship game when you're sitting courtside to see greatness, right? Except I don't know how great it was. My friend Mike, well, he was a Michigan fan. And coming down the stretch, I'll just say this. Keep this in mind when you watch this clip that's coming up and how this game ended and why it was memorable in one of the national championship games that's back in lore. It seems there were a lot of national championship games in the Dome or in New Orleans that go into all-time lore. Everything happens in New Orleans. But just keep this in mind. One person says, oh, I don't think they have any timeouts. And the Michigan fan says, yes, they do. Just keep that in mind as you watch this.
Long, a 2 to tie. Michigan will have to bring it.
Oh, he walked and the referee missed it.
Weber brings it into the front court. They have no timeouts remaining.
Oh, he causes too many timeouts. That's a technical foul.
He called a timeout. Michigan doesn't have any.
He got by with a walk, and Jimmy calls a he calls a timeout. He doesn't realize that's Michigan's too many, and so it'll be a technical foul. North Carolina shooting and the ball.
Weber thought they had a timeout in their pocket. They did not. Thus, it's a technical foul against the Wolverines. North Carolina will shoot 2 plus have possession. Now, look, 2-point differential, and since they'll get possession and Michigan can't stop it, he makes 2, this game will be over.
And Jen, the other thing that's interesting, we talked about foul problems. It turned out not enough fouls with the problem for Michigan.
Four-point difference. North Carolina with 11 seconds to go, and they have the basketball. Dean Smith 8 seconds away from a second national championship. The Fab Five comes up short again. There you have it. North Carolina is the 1993 national champion.
Kidding aside and, messing with my friend Mike, one of the coolest moments of my career, and at the time, my very young career, I was 24 years old at the time, was being this 24-year-old kid is holding a tape recorder to Dean Smith's mouth. there ain't much cooler than that. I mean, this was back in the days where you could actually get to the players and coaches before they went in the locker room, before they went and sat at that table. And I got to stand there and talk to Dean Smith. That literally was one of the coolest moments in my career, and one obviously I haven't forgotten 31 years later, along with that game. So, yeah, I've been to a few Final Fours here in New Orleans, and I've been lucky enough. You know, I said on the show talking to Scott Rabelais about, you know, two things that I've never done that I've always wanted to do, and that was go to a Masters. I don't have to cover it. I could just go. Something I never got to do. I always talked about with my dad, never got a chance to do, and go to a Super Bowl. I've covered a bunch of Super Bowl events here in New Orleans, but I've never been able to cover or go to the game. Hopefully that'll change this year. But I've covered a lot of and been to quite a few Final Fours, and lucky enough to do that throughout my career. Final Four this week, and who you got? How can you not pick UConn, right? I mean, we didn't even talk about it, but how can you not pick UConn? We certainly will preview the national championship game on Monday's show. That will come up. We will at least make predictions, and we'll have all sorts of things next week. We're going to get back into the Saints. I know we had a week off of the Saints. I took Monday off. I'm, again, a little under the weather. I'm trying to fake it today. I hope I've done a good enough job, and you've stayed with me for that. But we will be back on Monday. Hopefully I'll be back to semi-normal. We will be back talking about the Saints. Obviously, next week going to be talking about the Pelicans run. Oh, yeah, breaking news, by the way, that Gabe sent me. Bronny James, who recently entered the transfer portal, has put his name in for the NBA draft. You kind of knew that was coming. I think reading through I don't even think you need to read through what LeBron says. I mean, LeBron's pretty much telling you he doesn't have a lot of time left. And he wants to be able to play with his son. So that's coming. He's going to play with his son, and he's probably only got a year or two left. We'll see how that goes. But Bronny James has entered his name into to be eligible for the NBA draft. And we'll be talking about more of that. Anyway, lots to talk about next week. We are just, 3 weeks away from the draft. As we start shifting our attention toward the draft, I am going to start next week doing shorts on not necessarily potential Saints picks, but really potential first-round picks. So, obviously, potential Saints picks are in there. You know what I think. I think they need a tackle. And so there will be lots of tackle shorts coming up. I'm going to start working on that over the weekend, I hope. And those will be coming up beginning next week. But we're going to have all the rest of the way. There will not be a show going the rest of the way before the draft that we will not at least have one Saints segment in it, even if it's just me giving my thoughts. That's how we're going to go going forward. But that is going to wrap it up for this Friday, April the 5th, 2024. I want to thank today's guest, Christian Clark, Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com, Times-Picayune, The Advocate, and I guess Dattitude, if you want to look at it. We're all part of the same family, right? So we thank Christian for joining us, and he will be back very soon. We will certainly have some Pelican segments as they get close to hopefully avoiding the play-in game and getting into the playoffs. We remind you finally to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell, ding, 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 to remind you every time we go on the air live. We are trying to get a regular time. It's going to be, I think, 10 o'clock for the most part. We may do 11 on Mondays, 10 on Wednesday and Friday, but I think I finally settled on morning. That seems to work a little bit better for everybody. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast if you don't want to do the YouTube thing. And you can always find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. That is going to do it. We will see you Monday. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Look, don't stare into the sun, okay? I mean, I don't care if there's clouds up there. Just don't stare into the sun. I'm really sick of hearing out of an abundance of caution. Tell your kids not to stare in the sun. We'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.